Usually when we pick up a stack of sources like this, there's a clear linear path. We're looking at the history of a specific war or, the development of a breakthrough technology. But this week,
This week is different.
the stack is fighting with itself.
Yeah.
It feels less like a research project and more like a cage match.
It really is a collision. It's one of those topics where the Venn diagram seems like it shouldn't touch at all. You have two circles that are just miles apart.
Right. So on one side of the desk, we have the collected fragments of Sappho, Archaic Greek. We're talking the 7th century BCE. She is, for many people, the ultimate icon of pagan desire, female homoeroticism, and polytheistic prayer.
The absolute peak of that tradition. And then on the other side...
On the other side of the desk, we have the Church Fathers, patristic theology, the architects of Christian orthodoxy, people like Tatian, Clement of Alexandria, Origen.
Two groups that, historically speaking, should not be in the same room. Or at least you wouldn't expect them to be on friendly terms. You'd expect oil and water.
And yet, the research suggests they are just inextricably linked. We aren't just looking at how the church reacted to Sappho, though we will get to that, and the persistent rumors of book burning.
We'll definitely get to the book burning. That's a huge myth we need to unpack.
Exactly. But we're looking at a much stranger phenomenon. We're looking at how Sappho's specific brand of longing, this intense physical desire, seems to echo almost perfectly in the Hebrew scriptures, specifically the Song of Songs.
It is one of those literary mysteries that makes you uncomfortable at first. It really is. You read Sappho describing her physical symptoms of desire, the sweating, the shaking, the tongue breaking, and then you pick up the Bible and you realize they're using the same language. The frequency is identical.
It's uncanny. And that similarity, that tension, it poses the question we are trying to answer today. It's a question that came up repeatedly in the source material, and it's the real mission for this deep dive.
Right, the central question.
How can a Christian, specifically someone committed to a biblical worldview, actually benefit from reading Sappho?
Yeah.
Or is the worldview difference just too toxic? Is there too much poison in the well to drink from it?
And to answer that, we have to move past the surface level. We can't just say, oh, art is pretty. We have to look at the theology of desire. We have to look at what the early church actually did with these texts, not just what the internet says they did. This requires some real critical engagement.
Okay, so to do that right, we need to start at the beginning, and I mean the very beginning of Western literature. We need to place Sappho on the map. Because I think modern listeners, we know the name, we know the association with the island of Lesbos.
Sure, the name is famous.
But I don't think people realize just how big of a deal she was in her own time.
Yeah.
She wasn't just another poet.
No, not at all. She was the standard. We are talking about the period between, say, 630 and 570 BCE. This is Archaic Greece. So you have to forget the Parthenon, forget Socrates walking around Athens questioning people.
That's all much later.
That is the classical period, which is a good 2 centuries later. Sappho is writing in a time that is much rawer, much more turbulent. And in that world, she wasn't just a poet. She was the poetess.
Capital T, capital P, like a proper noun.
Exactly. In the ancient world, if you said the poet, everyone knew you meant Homer, period. End of discussion. If you said the poetess, everyone knew you meant Sappho.
That's incredible status.
It's hard to overstate. Plato, writing much, much later, calls her the 10th muse. As if the 9 original muses weren't enough, they had to add her to the roster. Strabo, the geographer, writes that in all of recorded history, there isn't a single woman who can even be compared to her.
That's a level of celebrity that's hard to contextualize today. She was on the coinage of Lesbos. She had statues dedicated to her in cities she'd never even visited. It's like being on the dollar bill and having a monument in Washington, D.C. just because you wrote good songs.
It really is. But the reason for that fame, and this is absolutely crucial for our comparison with the Bible later, is that she fundamentally changed what literature was for. Before Sappho, you have the epic tradition. You have Homer.
The Iliad and the Odyssey. The blockbusters, the big public stories.
Right. And what is the Iliad about? It's about the wrath of Achilles. It's about the movements of armies, the intervention of gods, the fate of entire cities. It is objective. The narrator is calling upon the muse to tell a story about history. It's external. It's looking out at the horizon.
It's sing goddess of the rage. It's not sing about how I'm feeling today.
Precisely. Sappho initiates what scholars call the shift to the lyric eye, the eye of the poem. She turns the camera 180 degrees. She stops looking at the battlefield and starts looking into the mirror. She basically invents the subjective voice in Western literature.
There's that specific fragment in the stack fragment 16 that seems to explicitly call this out. It reads almost like a manifesto against Homer.
It is a manifesto. It's a textbook example of a priamel, which is a literary device where you list a bunch of things just so you can dismiss them and elevate your own choice.
Okay, so walk us through it.
She writes, "Some say an army of horsemen is the most beautiful thing on the black earth. Some say an army of foot soldiers. Some say a fleet of ships."
Which is? That's basically a summary of the Iliad. That's the highlight reel of the entire epic tradition right there.
It is. She lists the masculine, military, epic virtues, power, glory, force, all the things Homer celebrated, and then she pivots. She just turns the whole thing on its head. But I say, it is whatever one loves. Whatever one loves. And just like that, the world changes. It sounds so simple to us because we live in a world Sappho helped create. We are steeped in the idea that our personal feelings define our reality.
It's the foundation of modern individualism, really.
It is. But in 600 BCE, to say that the beating of your own heart is more significant, more beautiful than the movement of the king's cavalry, that is a radical democratization of value. It's a revolution.
It relocates beauty from the public square, from the objective world of armies and states, to the private interior of a single person. It says the most important thing happening in the world isn't the war, it's the crush I have on this person.
And it makes desire eros, the central organizing principle of the world. For Sappho, the cosmos doesn't turn on war or politics, it turns on eros. And that brings us to the nature of that desire, because she doesn't describe it as a pleasant, warm fuzziness.
No, not at all. Reading fragment 31, it sounds like a medical emergency. I was reading this and thinking, you need a doctor, not a poet. It's clinical.
It is. Longinus, the ancient literary critic, preserved this poem specifically because he was just amazed at how she selected the most intense physical symptoms and stitched them together into one coherent experience. He saw it as the height of the sublime.
Okay, let's look at the symptoms. So she's watching a woman she desires, sitting across from a man, laughing and talking with him. And she falls apart. She says her tongue breaks.
Glossa age. And that's a violent image. It's not, I can't find the words. It's a shattering of speech. She loses the very ability to communicate.
Then she says a subtle fire races under her skin. Her eyes go blind. Her ears are drumming. She's sweating cold sweat. She's trembling. And then that famous line.
I am greener than grass, and I feel like I am almost dead.
Greener than grass, like the pale green of a new shoot, or someone who's about to be sick.
It's the color of chlorophyll, but also the color of pallor. It's life and death at the same time. It's a panic attack. It is a complete physiological response to an emotional stimulus. She's describing love not as an emotion, but as a pathology, a sickness that attacks the body.
And this is where the historical context of her life becomes so important.
Yeah.
Because she isn't writing these poems in a vacuum. She's writing them about other women within a very specific social circle.
Right. We need to clarify the social setting here. Obviously, she's from Lesbos, and the term lesbian comes from her island. But the notes in our stack are pretty clear that the social structure was unique. The prevailing theory is that Sappho was a leader of a theasos.
A theasos. Okay, unpack that for us. What is that?
Think of it as a sort of circle or confraternity of women. These were educational and religious groups. Elite young women would come to Lesbos to learn from Sappho. They'd learn music, poetry, dance, and ritual performance, all in preparation for them to be married off.
So it was like a finishing school, a conservatory.
A conservatory with a very high spiritual voltage. It was a space entirely for women, dedicated to the muses, and crucially to Aphrodite. And within that guild, that circle, there was intense emotional and, yes, erotic bonding.
And her poetry is the evidence of that.
Her poetry makes it undeniable that she felt powerful sexual desire for these women. She is constantly invoking Aphrodite, the goddess of sex and desire, to help her navigate these relationships.
Which brings us perfectly to fragment 1, the Ode to Aphrodite. This is the only complete poem we have, right? It hasn't been eaten by worms or lost to time.
The only one. And it's a prayer. This is absolutely vital for understanding the worldview difference we are going to explore later. Sappho summons Aphrodite to come down from Olympus in her chariot of sparrows, just as she has before.
And there is this incredible intimacy in the poem. Aphrodite actually speaks to her. She asks, "Who is it this time, Sappho? Who's hurting you?"
It sounds almost weary, doesn't it? Like, here we go again, Sappho. Who are we chasing this week? Who has wronged you now?
It really does. And then Aphrodite makes a promise.
She does. If she flees, soon she shall pursue. If she does not accept gifts, she shall give them. If she does not love, soon she shall love, even against her will.
Even against her will.
Yeah.
That's a chilling line.
It is. But notice the dynamic here. It is transactional. Sappho gives the hymn, she gives the worship. Aphrodite gives the girl. It is about the manipulation of another person's will. Sappho wants to possess what she desires, and she uses the divine as a tool, as a cosmic leverage to get it.
So to sum up this world, it's visceral, it's subjective, focused on the I. It's polytheistic and transactional. It's about the lyric I screaming its wants into the void and demanding the gods answer.
That's a perfect summary.
And now we switch tracks.
Ah,
Because scholars have been pointing out for a long time that if you take fragment 31, the one about the fire under the skin, and you lay it next to the Bible, things get very, very weird.
specifically next to the Song of Songs, or as it's also known, the Song of Solomon.
Right. Now, we have to clear the air first, because this was where people can get confused.
Yeah.
Was Solomon reading Sappho? Was Sappho reading the Torah?
Almost certainly not. The timelines are fuzzy, but there is absolutely no evidence of direct textual contact or influence. Sappho is on an island in the Aegean Sea. The Hebrew texts that make up the Song of Songs are being compiled in Judea and possibly Babylon. They are distinct literary ecosystems.
So this isn't plagiarism. This is more like parallel evolution.
It's what we call the cultural soup of the ancient Near Eastern and Mediterranean world. People in the Levant and people in Greece were experiencing the same seasons, the same agriculture, the same basic human biology of desire. So when they reached for metaphors to describe love, they reached for the same things.
Okay, let's get into the specifics. Let's look at some of these aha moments in the text. The nature imagery is the first and most obvious one.
Yes. In both texts, the beloved's body is described as a garden. It's a place of beauty and delight. Both use pomegranates, apples, lilies as symbols of beauty and fertility. There's a lushness to the sexuality. It's not abstract, it's earthy. It smells like soil and fruit and flowers.
Sappho has that famous fragment comparing a girl to a sweet apple on the highest bough. And the Song of Songs says, "As an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men."
The imagery is almost interchangeable at times, but the physical symptoms of desire, for me, that's the strongest link, the one that really makes you sit up and pay attention. In Song of Songs, chapter 5, the woman describes her reaction when her beloved knocks at her door late at night.
Right, puts his hand to the latch.
And she says, "My heart was thrilled within me," or in some translations, "my innards churned for him." The Hebrew word there implies a deep physical disturbance in the gut. It's a visceral reaction. And later she says she is faint with love.
Lovesick, that's the classic term.
Exactly. And the Hebrew implies a weakness, a draining of vitality, just like Sappho's greener than grass, just like Sappho's feeling that she is almost dead. Both texts agree that eros is a force that assaults the body. It isn't safe. It isn't tame.
Sappho has that amazing word for it, glucupacron.
Yes, sweet bitter. She coined that word. It's brilliant. We usually say bittersweet, but she put the sweet first, the initial pleasure, followed by the inevitable pain. And Song says love is strong as death, and its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord.
So they both view love as this catastrophic, elemental force. It's not a greeting card emotion, it's a force of nature, like a fire or a flood.
Absolutely. And they both express this overwhelming emotion through the same literary genre, the wedding song. Sappho was a professional writer of epithalamia. That's the Greek term for wedding songs. She was hired to sing at the feasts.
And the Song of Songs, when you look at its structure.
It's structured as a cycle of wedding poems. It has the procession, the praise of the bride's beauty, the voice of the groom, the consummation. It shares that same basic DNA.
So the form is the same. The imagery is the same. The description of the biological reaction to desire is the same.
Which leads us to the first major realization for a Christian reader looking at this. The Bible is not hermetically sealed from human culture. It wasn't dropped from heaven in an alien language. It uses the language of the world, the poetry of the world, to convey its truth. God didn't invent a special Holy Spirit language for love. He used the poetry that people were already singing in the vineyards and at their weddings.
But, and this is the absolute pivot point of the entire deep dive, the worldview is not the same. If we stopped at look, they're similar, we miss the entire point. We might actually be misleading people.
We would miss the most important point, because while the feeling of love is identical in both texts, the structure around that feeling, the container for it, is diametrically opposed.
Okay, let's break that down. This is the idea of ordered versus unordered love.
Let's start with the orientation of the love. Sappho's world is often triangular. It's Sappho, the girl she desires, and Aphrodite. But Aphrodite is a goddess of chaos. She's fickle. She's driven by lust and jealousy herself. So the love in Sappho's poems is almost always about the lack of possession. It's about the chase, the jealousy, the pain of separation, the person leaving.
It's transient. It feels like she's trying to hold water in her hands. It feels like sand slipping through her fingers.
It's obsessed with transience. Sappho is keenly aware that she is going to age, that her beauty will fade. She knows the young girl she loves will be married off to a man or will move on to another lover. The poetry is a desperate attempt to freeze a moment that is already dying. It's fundamentally tragic.
And the Song of Songs, what's the structure there?
The Song of Songs is teleological, which is just a fancy way of saying it's going somewhere. It has a destination. It's moving toward a covenant. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. That isn't a wish, it's a seal. It's a statement of mutual exclusive possession.
It's a commitment.
It's a commitment. The intensity of the passion, which is just as hot, if not hotter than Sappho's, is poured into a container that can actually hold it. That container is marriage, the covenant.
So Sappho offers the raw explosion of the feeling, but the Bible offers a fireplace for that fire.
That's a fantastic analogy. Sappho's fire burns the house down. That's why she feels almost dead. The biblical fire warms the house. It gives life. It leads to fertility, to children, to a future. Sappho's eros is sterile. It produces beautiful poems, but it doesn't produce life. The biblical eros is constantly linked to fruitfulness, to gardens, to the future of the people of God.
And then there's the whole allegorical layer that exists in the Christian and Jewish traditions.
Right. For over 2,000 years, Christians and Jews have read the Song of Songs not just as a beautiful poem about human marriage, but as a picture of God's covenant love for his people, for Israel, or for the church. The intensity of the groom's love for the bride is seen as a reflection of God's passionate pursuing love for us.
You can't really do that with Sappho. It doesn't work.
No. You can't read Fragment 31 as an allegory for Jesus and the believer because the dynamic is all wrong. Sappho's love is possessive and self-focused. I want you to make me feel better. I want Aphrodite to force you to love me. The biblical love, epitomized in Christ, is self-giving. The groom gives himself for the bride. It's a complete reversal of the pagan model.
So, okay, we've established that the texts are cousins in style, but total strangers in spirit. Now we have to address the elephant in the room, or rather, the bonfire. And
the burning of the books.
I grew up hearing this. I think most people who've heard of Sappho have heard this story. The idea that we only have fragments of her work because the mean, repressive patriarchal church burned all her books in the Middle Ages to silence a queer, powerful woman.
It is a very powerful story. It's compelling. It fits a certain narrative about the church being the enemy of art, of sexuality, of freedom. It makes for a great villain arc.
Was there any truth to it? What did the sources say?
There is virtually none. It is, for all intents and purposes, a myth.
Okay, so walk us through the forensics on this. Where did this myth even come from if it's not true?
It shows up very, very late. We're talking about the Renaissance. Humanist scholars like Joseph Justus Scaliger in the 16th century started making claims that the church had burned her books. The story gets attached to a couple of different figures. First, Gregory of Nazianzus, a 4th century bishop and theologian.
One of the Cappadocian fathers. A major figure.
A huge figure. Later, the blame gets shifted to Pope Gregory VII in the 11th century. The story becomes that one of these powerful churchmen, offended by her immorality, ordered all 9 of her books to be publicly burned in Rome and Constantinople.
But we have no contemporary records of these burnings, no eyewitness accounts, nothing from the time.
Absolutely nothing. Zero. In fact, we have the opposite. We have church fathers from that era, including Gregory of Nazianzus himself, quoting her and clearly being influenced by her style. It makes no sense that he would be burning her books with one hand and imitating her poetry with the other.
So if they didn't burn the books, where are they? Why do I have to buy a book called The Fragments of Sappho? Why can't I buy the collected works of Sappho? There must be a reason they disappeared.
There is. And the real reason is much more mundane, but also, I think, more interesting. You have to blame the economy of the Roman Empire and the evolution of the Greek language.
It is the grammar explanation. It wasn't theology, it was linguistics.
It really was. Sappho wrote in Aeolic Greek. That was the specific dialect of her home island, Lesbos. It has different spelling, different meter, different vocabulary than Attic Greek, which was the dialect of Athens, the dialect of Plato and Aristotle.
And Attic Greek became the standard, the one everyone learned.
Attic Greek evolved into what we call Koine Greek, the common tongue.
Yeah.
It's the language of the New Testament. It was the language of the Roman administration in the East. It was the language of education. By the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, reading Sappho in her original Aeolic was hard work. It would be like a modern English speaker trying to read Beowulf or Deep Chaucer without any footnotes. It's technically English, but it's a real struggle.
And books back then were incredibly expensive.
Extremely expensive. A single scroll was a luxury item. Copying it took weeks of manual labor by a trained scribe. So if you are a scribe in, say, 400 AD, and you have enough papyrus to copy one book, what are you going to choose? Are you going to copy the difficult, dialect-heavy poetry that only a few elite scholars can read? Or are you going to copy Homer or Plato or the Gospels, the books that everyone needs for a standard education?
You're going to copy the bestsellers. You're going to copy the curriculum.
Of course. So Sappho wasn't censored. She was just allowed to go out of print. She was a victim of market forces and changing school syllabi. Then you add in the general fragility of papyrus, the moisture of most climates outside of Egypt, library fires like the one in Alexandria, and just general neglect over centuries.
Yeah.
And her work simply vanished. It wasn't malice, it was neglect.
But surely the church had an opinion on her. They couldn't have just been indifferent to the poetess. They must have talked about her.
Oh, they had opinions, very strong ones. And this is where the nuance really comes in, because it wasn't a monolith. It wasn't one single Christian view. You had the bad cop reaction, represented most fiercely by a man named Tatian.
Tatian. He was a 2nd century apologist.
That's right. Tatian was a Syrian Christian, and he had a massive chip on his shoulder about Greek cultural superiority. He wrote a book called Address to the Greeks, where he basically just roasts their entire culture from top to bottom, and he takes aim directly at Sappho.
The notes have a quote here, and it is not subtle. He calls her a lust-crazed whore.
The Greek is Genean pornikon erotimenes, a little whore woman crazy with love. He attacks her for singing about her own licentiousness and debauchery. For Tatian, she is exhibit A for pagan immorality.
We have to be fair to Tatian's context, though. The early church was trying to carve out an identity in a Roman world that was incredibly sexually exploitative. Pederasty was common among the elite. Prostitution was part of temple worship. Slaves were sexually available to their masters.
Exactly. So the Christian sexual ethic chastity outside of marriage, faithfulness within it, the sanctity of the body as a temple of the Holy Spirit was a radical countercultural weapon. Tatian sees Sappho as the embodiment of the old, pagan, chaotic sexuality they are trying to escape. He looks at her and sees the darkness they just walked out of. He has no room for nuance.
But then you have the good cops, or maybe the more complex view, you have figures like Clement of Alexandria and Origen.
Right. Clement, who is also in Alexandria, quotes her. He treats her as a source of wisdom on certain matters, as a classical author you're supposed to have read. He integrates her into his arguments without the venom Tatian has. But Origen pulls the ultimate power move.
This goes back to the epithalamium connection again.
It does. Origen writes one of the first major Christian commentaries on the Song of Songs, and he is the first one to explicitly categorize the biblical book as an epithalamium.
He uses Sappho's genre tag for the Bible.
He uses the very specific technical literary term that everyone in the Greek-speaking world knew belonged to Sappho. By doing that, he's making a profound theological statement. He's saying, we are not rejecting this form of beauty. We are not rejecting the intensity of passionate love poetry. We are claiming it for God.
It's a form of theological appropriation, taking the enemy's weapon and using it for your own purposes.
It's plundering the Egyptians, as Augustine would later say. He's arguing that the devil doesn't get to own the wedding song. God invented it. So we're going to take the literary style perfected on Lesbos and use it to worship the God of Israel. We're going to redeem it.
That is a much more sophisticated and interesting relationship than just burn the witch.
Much more. It shows that the smartest thinkers in the early church were capable of distinguishing between the artistic form, which they saw as beautiful and potentially good, and the moral content or worldview, which they often disagreed with. They kept the art and they baptized the meaning.
Okay, so this brings everything to a head. We have the history, we have the texts, we have the complex reception. Now we have the listener sitting here today. Why does any of this matter? How do we apply this eat the meat, spit out the bones principle to Sappho in the 21st century?
I think there are 4 massive takeaways, 4 real benefits for a Christian who engages with her work seriously. The first is simply the appreciation of common grace.
This is the idea that all truth is God's truth, no matter where you find it.
Precisely. If you believe God created the human heart, then you believe he created the capacity for joy, for sorrow, for longing. Sappho is an expert witness on the subject of human longing. When she describes the pain of jealousy or the ache of unrequited love, she is telling the truth about a real human experience. A Christian can read that and say, yes, that is what it feels like to be broken. That honesty is a gift.
It prevents us from becoming stoics, from pretending that these deep emotions aren't real or powerful. It validates the emotional part of our created nature. It says, you aren't crazy for feeling this.
The second benefit, and for me this is the most exciting one from a biblical studies perspective, is that reading Sappho illuminates the New Testament. Think about the Apostle Paul. When he is writing to the church in Corinth, a major Greek port city steeped in pagan culture, and he talks about love.
You're talking about 1 Corinthians 13, the famous love chapter.
Exactly. When Paul's readers in Corinth heard the word love, their cultural default wasn't a nice, tame church potluck kind of love. Their default setting was Sappho. It was eros. It was the tongue-breaking, mind-shattering, greener-than-grass madness.
So when Paul writes, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, he isn't just giving a nice definition. He's picking a fight with an entire worldview.
He is drawing a razor-sharp contrast. He is saying, you think love is a chaotic fire that consumes you and makes you want to possess another person? No. True love agape is a fire that purifies and sustains you. It is patient. It is not self-seeking. You cannot understand the radical, culture-shattering nature of the Christian definition of love unless you understand the pagan definition it was meant to replace. Sappho gives you the before picture, so the Bible can give you the after.
That's huge. It turns a familiar passage from a nice sentiment on a wedding invitation into a cultural revolution. It means agape isn't just a different kind of love, it's the antidote to the sickness of disordered eros.
And that leads directly to the third benefit, the power of contrast. We live in a world that is, in many ways, very sapphic.
Follow your heart, you do you. Love is love. Do what feels right.
The modern world fundamentally agrees with Sappho's great discovery. The subjective feeling is the highest authority. If I feel it, it must be true and it must be good.
Reading Sappho shows us the end of that road. And the end of that road is loneliness. It's the glucupacron, the sweet bitter. It's the lover who is always leaving. It's a constant cycle of hunger that never gets truly fed.
So by reading her honestly, we see the cost of that worldview. We see where it leads.
We see the intense beauty of it, but also the inherent tragedy. And it makes the Christian alternative covenant stability, self-giving faithfulness look not like a set of restrictive rules designed to kill your joy, but like a life raft. When you are drowning in Sappho's chaotic sea of emotion, the Ark of the Covenant starts to look pretty good.
It completely changes the vibe of the commandments around sex and relationships. They aren't there to kill the fun. They're there to keep you from drowning in the chaos she describes so beautifully. Exactly. And finally, the fourth benefit is the element of cultural engagement. Just as Clement and Origen read the Greek classics so they could speak to the Greeks, we can read foundational texts like Sappho to understand our own culture. We need to understand this deep language of desire. If we want to understand our neighbors, we need to see that people are starving for connection.
It's the hunger.
Yeah.
It all comes back to the hunger.
Sappho is profoundly hungry. She is screaming for something eternal, something that will truly satisfy her, and she keeps trying to find it in the beauty of another person, and it keeps failing. The poems are a record of that failure. A Christian reader can look at that profound, beautiful hunger and say, I recognize that. I know what that's for. You're looking for God.
That brings us to the final provocative thought we wanted to leave you with. It's this idea of the longing as a signpost.
C.S. Lewis was the master of this idea. He talked about it constantly. He called it Sehnsucht, that inconsolable longing for something we can't quite name. And his argument was, if we find in ourselves a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world.
So Sappho's poetry, the intensity of it, the greener than grass, the near-death experience of beauty, it's not just about sex. It might not even be primarily about sex.
It's a signal. It's a beautiful, aching neon sign pointing out of the world and into the dark. Sappho thought the answer was Aphrodite. She thought the answer was the beautiful girl in her circle. But the text itself shows that those things never worked for long. They were always bittersweet.
The Christian claim is that the bittersweet ache is actually a homing beacon. It's a feature, not a bug.
It's the shadow of a greater, more substantial love. It's the echo of the flame of the Lord we read about in the Song of Songs. We are all wired for an intensity of love that finite human beings simply can't provide. We try to force other humans to be gods for us, and they break under the pressure. Sappho is a catalog of that beautiful, tragic breaking.
So reading the 10th Muse isn't an act of rebellion or a compromise for a Christian. It's a diagnostic tool. It helps us see the shadow so that we can turn around and better appreciate the substance.
And that, I think, is a deep dive worth taking.
I couldn't agree more. It's been a fascinating journey from the islands of the Aegean all the way to the desk of the Apostle Paul.
Keep reading and keep thinking.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.